Hi, back again, still dealing with this theme, is Christianity tyrannical? Basically, the question is, would the world be a better place without Christianity? We're now looking at the theme of historical tyranny, times in the past where Christianity has acted in a tyrannical, oppressive way. And one of the more contemporary films that I can think of that deals with this subject matter is The Kingdom of Heaven, an excellent film. If you ever get a chance to see it, do watch the director's cut though. It's much more informative, even if it is a little longer. But the Kingdom of Heaven deals with this theme. It's set in the time of the Crusades, of Saladin and the sacking of Jerusalem, and it depicts a Christianity which is as militant as militant Islam is today. It depicts a Christianity which seeks to spread its influence through the means of the sword. Now, the Crusades were a continuous movement which began about the 11th century and went through to about the 13th century. They were essentially military endeavours that were sanctioned by the church, blessed, if you will, by the church, and various incentives were offered in order to persuade people to join up. Things like exemption from taxes, payment of debts, protection of family and property, and of course a one-way ticket to paradise, bypassing purgatory. Now, the Crusades are just one example of Christian tyranny throughout world history. There are others, of course. But if we want to know what Christianity is really like at its core, we need to go back to its founder, to Jesus Christ, and find out what he had to say about the use of the sword. And if we look in the Gospels in the Bible, we find out that Jesus spoke out against the use of temporal power as a means of protecting the gospel or even furthering its cause. Take, for example, what Jesus says in Matthew 26 verse 52. He's rebuking Peter here. And he says to Peter, "Put your sword back in its place, for all who draw the sword will die by the sword." Later on in his trial, when he's being questioned by Pilate, he says this, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jews. But now my kingdom is from another place." So Jesus spoke of a kingdom from another world, which, by virtue of its otherworldliness, was not supposed to employ this world's violent means of persuasion. Crusading Christianity was not Christ's Christianity. Well, is that case concluded then? Not exactly. You see, there are some problematic verses in the Gospels in which Jesus appears, at the very least, to contradict himself. Let's take Matthew chapter 10 verse 34 to start off with. Jesus says there this, "Do not suppose I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household." So what's that about? Well, the truth is that Jesus understood that there were going to be some people who wouldn't like what he had to say. Yes, there would be some who would embrace his message wholeheartedly, but equally there would be those who would hate, reject, and oppose it. And consequently, his message, whilst being good news, would also bring division, and even to the closest and strongest of relationships. So when Jesus speaks here about bringing a sword, he does so, he uses the image to prepare his followers for the pain of separation and rejection that would certainly come as a result of their embracing his message. So, no contradiction there. But what about Luke chapter 14 verse 26, where Jesus says these words, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father, his mother, his wife and children, his brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple." Far from division being a coincidental repercussion of Jesus' teaching, it seems that here he's actively promoting it. But we need to look deeper. We cannot take this verse in isolation, and we need to consider the wider context of Jesus' words. You see, elsewhere Jesus says he has not come to abolish the Old Testament law, but to fulfill it. And he even goes so far as to say that the law, the Old Testament law, will stand as long as the earth keeps on turning. And one of the things that that law taught was that a man must honour his father and his mother. So here in Luke 14:26, Jesus cannot be speaking literally. And actually, if we go back and look at the verses we just considered in Matthew, we see Jesus saying the same thing there, but in an entirely different way. Jesus has just said that a man's enemies will be the members of his own household. He then goes on to say this: anyone who loves his father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves his son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And anyone who does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. You see what Jesus is saying there? He's saying, yes, love your parents, love your wife, love your children, love your brothers and sisters, but love me more. Well, the observant among you will realise that between my last point and now time has moved on. It is night time, and hence the light above my head, which I'm aware looks a bit like a halo, but trust me, that is purely accidental. I am no saint. But to move on, we're going to look now at Luke 22:36, another of the problematic verses in the Gospels. Luke 22:36. You see, here at this point in his ministry, Jesus is facing the cross, and he has gathered his disciples around him to warn them that there are perilous times ahead. And he gives them this advice. He says, now, if you have a purse, take it, and also a bag. And if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. Okay, he's encouraging his disciples to arm themselves, or so it seems. How do we wriggle out of that one? Well, fortunately we don't have to wriggle quite so much. You see, it's evident from Jesus' later words and actions that he didn't intend himself to be taken literally. Not too much later in the Gospels we find him under arrest, and one of his more enthusiastic disciples, Peter, pulls out a sword, which perhaps he thought Jesus had advised him to buy, strikes off the ear of the servant of the high priest. Jesus then rebukes Peter in words we've already heard. He tells him to put his sword away, for all who draw the sword will die by the sword. Those are the words he uses. He then kneels down and he places his hand over the ear of the servant of the high priest and he heals him. I'm sure you'll agree that those aren't the actions and the words of someone who intended his disciples to buy swords in order to mount an armed resistance to his arrest. So whatever motivated crusading Christianity and the church's treatment of heretics, it was not Christ. The truth is that the Christianity that Jesus preached was anything but a violent revolutionary movement. This is a really irritating little speck on the camera. It's probably what's making me blink so much every time it goes in my eye. Sorry about that. Bye for now.